link in the chat right now to stream text, which is available as another captioning function that can show up on your phone or another device so that you can go along with us on a different screen. And with that, we want to talk a little bit about how you can engage today with us. Option number one would be the Q&A. And so there's a Q&A section also in the toolbar, and you'll have the opportunity for the entire time that we're doing this interview to send questions to Nina that we will then get to ask at the very end. So send your questions during our conversation. And if the Q&A section is not accessible to you, click the raise hand button and we will allow you to pop in and ask your question. And along with that, all of you are welcome to be using the chat and commenting in the chat for the whole session, giving us your thoughts and comments and anything that you want to be chatting about during the time. So with that, I will welcome Evan onto the screen and pass it over to him. He is the youth lead on this project, and so he'll give us a little bit more information about what this project is. And so there you go.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, I'm Evan Milburn. Hi, I'm Evan Milburn. He, him, his pronouns. I'm 25 years old. I am a white male. I'm wearing a blue shirt. I have Apert syndrome. And yeah, I'm excited for you all be here today. So some goals of this speaker series is to learn from disabled activists, finding pride in disabled identity, developing leadership skills among disabled youth, such as Tame and I, being able to meet role models reflective of our experiences and collect and share stories from the disabled community. But before we begin, I'll be remiss if I didn't take a minute to say a special thank you to some amazing people, both on screen and behind and off screen. First and foremost, our amazing mentors from CFLC. Some of them are in the audience and some of them are on screen with, some of them are here with us. For sharing their wisdom and expertise in helping put each event on. Also, we are guest Nina Tame for taking time out of her busy day to tell us more about her life as an advocate, what inspires her, and how we can help carry out her message. And lastly, but not least, our amazing ASL interpreters and our captioners for providing access needs to all you guys. To follow the conversation on social media, we're on Twitter and Instagram at #YoDisabledLeadership, or we're at YoDisabled and Proud on Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to follow Nina Tame, she's at Nina_Tame on both Instagram and Twitter. If you want to follow myself or Tame, my Instagram handle is sir.whiteknight0701 or Twitter at @EvMeisterMilburn. Now I'll pass it over back to Sam to share her social media handles.
Perfect. My social media is Instagram at blind_person_in_area, blind person in area. And my Twitter is just at blind person area. So those are the two ways that you can follow me. And now I have the super exciting opportunity to introduce our speaker for today, Nina Tame. And Nina Tame was super formative in my understanding of my own disability identity and was one of the first activists that I really got to follow and got to just experience the work of that made me really proud to be a disabled person. And so I'm super thankful for that in my own life, but she does a lot of other cool work in like mentoring and writing and doing disability advocacy in the UK. So we have our very first international speaker today. And we're super excited about the work that she does and just getting to learn more about that. She lives in the UK with her husband and her 4 children, and she is really passionate about social justice, savory snacks, and kitchen disco with her kids, which we love. So we'd love to invite Nina up onto the screen right now to give her image description and anything else she wants to say about herself before we get started.
Hi, thank you, Tatum. So I'm Nina. I'm 40 years old and I'm a white woman. I've got short brown hair, and behind me is a white wall and quite a few colourful cushions. And it's really nice to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you here. And I think kind of our first question, just to get into it, is um, about how you're doing right now and how you're doing amidst this pandemic. We know that it's been so much, especially for the disability community. And so just wanting to check in, see how you're doing, what that experience has been like for you, and we'll go from there.
God, I feel like I could talk about this for the whole time. It's kind of been like real 50-50. So on one hand, being at home with my people in this little bubble has actually been really nice. I'm really privileged. We've got like an outside space. So like we've locked down quite a few times in the UK. So that sort of didn't feel too bad. And actually being sort of away from the outside world just felt really relaxing. Like I don't think I realized how much sort of armor I put on when I leave the house until I'd had like this time of not having to do it. So it was like, okay, this is nice. But then on the flip side, and I think it's probably quite similar over here as it was, you know, as it is for you guys, is that the treatment of disabled people during this, like at the beginning over here, we had they were releasing sort of disabled people and elderly people back into care homes without testing them. So it sort of absolutely went rampant. We had this huge amount of disabled deaths that nobody was talking about. Nobody really seemed to care about. You know, seeing all the access get put in place that we'd all been asking for so long, and now kind of seeing the access being taken away, and like, you know, things like disabled parking spots being used for outside dining areas. It's just been a lot. It's just felt like I've kind of felt like this real, wow, this is how people sort of view disability and sort of how undervalued we are, has been the main sort of thing. And yeah, so I could go on about it for ages and ages, but I'm kind of, you know, I've had my first vaccine now. I'm due my second one in a couple of weeks. So I'm sort of partly looking forward to getting back out and also partly not. I would like to get back out if all the non-disabled people could shield for a year and then we just get to have the world to ourselves for a year. That I'm kind of, I don't think it's going to happen, but that's what I would like. So yeah, I'm kind of okay. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I love that. And I loved your video on Instagram, the song about coming back. Like that was probably my favorite thing that I've seen on Instagram in a while. So love that. But yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
So you mentioned a lot, talk a lot about your disability. And I wonder what events in your life led you to embracing your disability and kind of becoming an advocate.
So it took me a long time to embrace my disability. So I was born disabled. I was born with spina bifida, which is like affects your spine and your nerves and your legs and stuff. And throughout kind of secondary school, high school, sort of through my teenage years, I was a lot more visibly disabled. I used crutches and a wheelchair. I was in and out of hospital a lot. And then it kind of settled down in my 20s. And being sort of, for me, my teenage experience, my school experience was awful. And I basically told myself that being disabled was awful and that part of myself was something that should be hidden as much as I could. And I should try and be as sort of non-disabled as possible. And I kind of went through my life like that. And then I kind of started losing, felt like loads of things happened at once. I started to lose my mobility. I got pregnant for the third time and my third son had spina bifida like me. And I also connected, like I found the disabled community. Like I grew up not knowing any other disabled people. And I think it was like through the hashtag like babe with a mobility aid or something. And I just suddenly remember seeing all these different disabled people and just being like, but they all look really cool and really hot with their walking stick or their wheelchair or whatever it is they've got. And it was like I just sort of, this whole new world was opened up to me. And with my son, like, disability looks gorgeous on him. And I was like, how can I sort of think that about him, but I've never thought that about myself? And all of these kind of events just seemed to happen over a few years. And when he started experiencing ableism, then yeah, that was it for me then. I was like, right, okay. And that kind of just gave me the push to really want to start talking about it. And I started off very sort of timidly. I think one of the first posts I did on Instagram was talking about how I didn't like being asked intrusive questions by strangers, like, you know, what's wrong with you? What's happened to you? And I was always brought up that it was polite to answer them. So I was really nervous kind of sort of putting this first post up, thinking about the people that I knew who would read it. But I got so much validation off of other disabled people in the community. Like, yeah, I hate being asked that question. It feels really intrusive. And it just kind of, it was just so validating and so supportive. And I just sort of didn't stop after that. I just kind of kept going. And that was sort of a few years ago now. And just, yeah, finding the disability community was absolutely life-changing for me.
That's awesome. I love that. And that's such a, like, I feel like that's so true for so many people, is like, you start out like just with like nothing and then move into the community. I love that. And I think we're kind of like in that area, like you were talking about with like family and kids and all of that. We're wondering like how kind of, I guess, during that same time or before that or whatever, how your disability has affected sort of your sense of like sexuality and dating and marriage, and maybe like what advice or like what I don't know, what you would offer to disabled youth who are thinking about all of that right now, because that's like the thing that's on all of our minds or whatever.
That's what we're all thinking about.
Yeah, of course.
So Jace is my husband. We're not actually married, but I just called him that because we had some money for a wedding, but then I decided that I wanted to get a dog instead. So priorities, but you know, yeah, my husband for all intents and purposes. So before I met Jace, I had just been with a series of very terrible relationships where I think because I didn't like my disability and I had all this real internalized ableism that I didn't even realize was ableism at the time. I brought that to my relationship. So I genuinely felt lucky to be with some real awful people, and my disability was made to seem like a burden and a pain and all of that sort of stuff. And Jace was kind of like, not like that at all, but it took me ages to be okay with him being nice. I'd kind of developed this real sense of being independent. So, you know, I'd fall over and I wouldn't even let him help me like up or anything like that. And it took a good few years to sort of really sort of settle into it and trust it. And so we've been together for 10 years now. And when we met, I was still walking with no mobility aids or anything else. And obviously over the years, my mobility has declined and I use a wheelchair now. And it has improved our relationship so much. Not that it was ever bad, but because I sort of used to try and hide sort of certain aspects of my disability, I would hide the fact I was incontinent. I would like go around the houses like so he wouldn't find out. And, you know, I could never fully relax when we were together because I'd be like, oh, I need to hide this and I need to do this. And so over the years, like, just sort of letting go and letting him take care of me as much as I take care of him, and not being this like I can do everything myself. And like this sort of intimacy that has come with that has just been amazing for us. Like I don't feel like I have to hide anything, and it's like hugely brought us closer. And I think if I was going to give advice to lovely disabled youth, it would be to not to be very aware that if you know, wanting to date somebody who isn't also disabled. Look at my face. So my face is pulling, sorry, I was pulling kind of a disgusted face at the idea that you'd want to date someone that wasn't disabled. But if that's what we're going for, then I think it's being aware that you are going to come across people, you know, some people who fetishize disability and they like the idea of being with a disabled person for all the wrong reasons, and other people that are just going to be awful to you, like they will say awful things, they will, you know. And I think it's so important to just be aware of that and to be aware of, you know, that's ableism, that's not me, because actually your disability is an amazing kind of arsehole detector. You know, you're gonna know very early on if somebody is worth, sorry, I've said to myself, really try to keep it clean, don't swear. But you know, you're gonna know really early on when you meet somebody if, you know, they are a decent person or if they're just an ableist person. See, I didn't swear that time. And I think it's having that confidence to know that you're not, you know, you're not lucky that somebody wants to go on a date with you because you're disabled. Like, ooh, no, like you are an absolute prize. And, you know, and I just, yeah, I'm very passionate about this because I just think I know I know what I was like and how kind of lucky I felt for just this sort of crumbs that I was thrown. And now I'm in a relationship where it's the proper, you know, proper love, proper, you know, sort of interdependent and all of this stuff. And that's how it should be. And nobody, you know, your disability isn't a flaw. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm a great person, but it's a shame I'm disabled. And aren't they, you know, kind for being with me? Like, no. You know, your disability makes you who you are. It makes you unique. And it is never something that means that you should settle for anything other than, you know, the absolute best.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Yeah, that is sadly something that we all need to hear way too often because like you said, there's a lot of ableist assholes out there. So
Yes.
we're very aware of that. But yeah, and I think taking that like a little bit further, especially because I don't even know if you know this, but it's Mother's Day here tomorrow in the UK.
Course, yeah.
So, or not, you're in the UK, I'm in the US. But Mother's Day here in the US tomorrow. And so we're wondering like what like you said, you have a son with a disability, and so like what did it kind of what have you been doing to ensure that he grows up with this disability pride that you're talking about? And what like what do you hope with that? Like what are your hopes for that disability pride to impact your son? Like what I don't know, like what's the difference maybe between that and your own childhood, or like what you're wanting for him that's different?
So it's a good question. I was brought up like we didn't really talk about my disability. Certainly didn't say, like, my mum and dad would never have referred to me as disabled, even though I clearly was. So I kind of just grew up thinking that, yeah, my disabled, you know, it's like I'd separated it. There was me and then there was my disabledness. And I'd sort of separated that out into I'm okay, but my disabled side is not okay. And for us with Clark, that's my son, we taught him about ableism, you know, when he was sort of old enough to grasp it. It was when, I suppose, you know, when he started going out into the world, when he started going to school, and he would come home really like, oh, just like sort of deflated because, you know, he'd been asked questions again about, you know, what's that leg brace, you know, what's that on your leg, that kind of thing. And excuse me. So I taught him about ableism because I didn't want him to internalize any of this stuff. You know, when somebody makes a comment about you, that's them, that's not you. This is what ableism is. This is what it means. This is what it means to be a disabled person and to live in this society. And, you know, made sure to show him lots of representation, not just Paralympians, you know, full spectrum of, excuse me, this is what disabled people can do. And also empowering him. I think one of the biggest things I did for him, keep saying we, it's clearly on me, was to say to him, you do not have to answer the questions. when somebody asks you, a child, an adult, whoever comes up to you and says, what's wrong with your leg? What's that on your leg? You don't have to answer. You can use me. You can say, well, my mum says I don't have to answer that. You can tell them to bugger off. You can literally answer however you want, because you're going to get this for the rest of your life now. And for most of my life, I did answer the questions, and I still feel a little bit weird not answering them now, because it's so ingrained in me to be polite to some stranger on the street. And I don't want that for him. I want him to have that confidence to know that, his medical story is his to tell when and if he wants to tell. So that was really important to me, just to sort of empower him with that, and also to give him sort of space for all the different feelings. Like, I'm not going to be putting on him, being disabled is brilliant and you must be okay with it, because it's not brilliant. Sometimes it's awful. And I want him to know that it's okay to express that to me. So, I'll sort of just check in sometimes and be like, what's the best thing about being disabled? And normally his answer is getting to wear trainers, like sneakers, to school. I'm like, okay, fair enough. And then it's like, what's the worst thing? And it's just opening up these conversations with him so he has that support and space to explore all the feelings. And he knows that, I very proudly identify with being disabled, and he currently does as well. But I'm also prepared, maybe that will change. Maybe he'll hit his teenage years and he'll want to remove himself from it. I don't know. But I'm going to be okay with that, because I think it's all just part of it. I think we all have times where, we can embrace our identity, and other times where it feels heavier and harder to be a disabled person. So I just wanted to empower him and not kind of put, I think a lot of non-disabled parents of disabled kids, firstly, they don't even use the word disabled. They'll dress it up as something else. But you kind of, you're disabled. So then if your parents aren't using that term, it's like, well, there must be something wrong with it then. And I think a lot of parents, also put this sort of narrative of, oh, they're so brave, they're so inspiring. They put all these sort of the same narratives that we get as disabled adults off of society, and don't want any of that on him either. So it's just, I think, and what I hope is that he will just grow up and not have internalized so much and have to spend so much money on therapy like I do to try and undo all of that. So my hope is, we get in there quicker. So I just want him to know that it's not him, it's ableism always.
That's awesome. Having that space to like feel all of it, so important. I love that.
The good, the bad, the ugly. Even acknowledging it too takes a tremendous amount of strength. Just acknowledging the good, the bad, the ugly, the other side of being disabled. It's definitely not a party all the time. It's not fun all the time, but there's definitely some raw emotions there. Absolutely,
and I think so. For example, with my upbringing, if I had said to a family member like, oh, somebody come up to me on the street today and asked me what was wrong with me and I found it really uncomfortable, they would have automatically gone, oh, but they meant well, and having your kind of sort of feelings diminished, is that the right word? And I found that sort of so hard. And I think it's, it is important that if he comes to me and says something, that I don't just sort of go, oh, it's fine, it is really important just to allow space for all the crap that comes with it and for all the hard feelings that come with it. Because if I'm not allowing him to let that out, then he's just, again, going to be internalizing it and swallowing that down. And and that's no good.
So talk more about ableism. So how would you define ableism? Because you write about it a lot in the blog and your Instagram, in your blog, in your Instagram account. But so how would you define it, and how has it impacted your life? And what advice would you give for people who face with ableism?
So I think for me, ableism is just the view that disabled people are less than, just, not as, whether it's, not as smart, not as attractive, not, we exist somewhere outside of society, and we're certainly not valued, all of these things. And I guess ableism shows up for me in the way I'm treated in the outside world by strangers. I use a wheelchair, so people will literally jump to get out of my way, which it's got to the point where I found it really jarring at first, and now it's just funny because it's like, you're literally, this is ridiculous. Okay, cool, keep going. And it will be things like, if I ask a question to somebody and I'm with somebody else, then they will always answer the person that's with me, not me. People will talk very loudly to me and slowly, or they'll say things. I was in a lift in a shopping centre with my friend once, just Saturday going shopping, all very grown up and lovely. And this lady was in the lift, and as she left the lift, she turned around to my friend and looked at me and just said, "Oh, bless." Like, I'm a grown woman, that's ridiculous. So I think, like, so sort of real life, it's a lot of awkwardness. I haven't really faced any real kind of hatred in I get it online though. People love calling me all sorts of ableist slurs on my Instagram. But yeah, in real life, it's more the kind of attitudes of other people. It was like the minute I sat in the wheelchair, I became both sort of completely invisible and also really visible all at the same time. It's like people know you're there, but they do not want you to, they will try and do everything to pretend they haven't seen you, or you'll get the opposite where somebody comes along and they act like they are so okay with you. Like big smiles, big nodding head, over the top, "Hello, you're okay," and then probably make some really non-funny joke about being in a wheelchair. So yeah, I think a lot of it is attitudes. And then, and also ableism shows up for me in access, not being able to get into venues, not being able to get in. Like, I live sort of in I suppose it's like a village, and most of the shops where I live aren't accessible because they're older buildings, and there's always like loopholes in our kind of sort of disability laws. There seems to be loopholes that businesses can get away with not putting a ramp in, or not putting access in. So I think it shows up like that. It's shown up for me sort of all through my life with healthcare, and being sort of dismissed by doctors or spoken to just like, I don't know, just not even sure what the word is, but yeah, so it sort of weaves its way through that as well. And yeah, and as I say, this last year during the pandemic, actually, as I say that, I've had sort of people literally say to me like, "Yeah, well, it is survival of the fittest, isn't it?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding? You're saying that to me?" Like, it shows up everywhere, because we live in this society that is inherently ableist. So it shows up everywhere for me. And I think, in regards to, what advice would I have for other people dealing with it? I think being aware of it is, like, in itself is really good, because I wasn't aware of it for so many years. So I thought it was all me. So I did think that I was the broken one, I was the burden, I was this, I was that. So once I was aware of it, I was like, "Oh, it's not me at all." Fantastic, that's great. And I think community is, as I said just now, like, if I was to, a lot of the sort of stuff that happens, if I was to talk to a non-disabled family member or friend about it, they wouldn't necessarily validate my feelings or understand it. Whereas I can guarantee I can text any one of my disabled friends and be like, "This has just happened," and they're going to be like, "Oh my God, that's awful." And we can have that solidarity together. So I think my advice would be, to find your community, to find other disabled people to connect with, to be able to share this stuff with, and, to know that just because people feel like they're entitled to ask you all sorts of intrusive questions that you don't ever have to answer them, that you don't owe anybody anything. And just because you're treated that in that sort of way, it doesn't mean that you are that. You are worthy, you are valuable, you are important in this world. And again, just to sort of not internalize it.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so important, like you said. I think for me, finding community was the like number one thing that really got me. Because yeah, I don't think I was also like always thought that it was me, and then all of a sudden realized it was ableism. So nice to like move in that direction. I'm wondering, like, this is kind of based off of this question, but what like like we have these moments, and like even knowing that it's ableism, I think a lot of the times when I'm like faced with a lack of access or like a intrusive question or really awful comment, there's that moment where it's like you kind of don't know what to say, you don't know how to handle it, like all of that. So like what is kind of your, like, how do you handle it when you get placed with one of these like intrusive questions or something like that? I know like you said, like I oftentimes go straight to like texting my friends who get it or whatever. So I'm wondering kind of like what your like safety net, I guess, is when you have that feeling and you're like, oh no, this just happened.
Yeah, I think it still catches me off guard, and I have to, like, one thing as well is like sometimes if I am sort of caught off guard with a question, I don't always respond how I'd like to respond. Like I find myself just sort of getting flustered, and I never tell people anymore. Like when they say, well, what's wrong with you, whatever the ridiculous question is, I never tell them. But my sort of go-to, if I'm not in my wheelchair and I'm on crutches and somebody asks, my go-to is, well, nothing's wrong with me, I'm disabled. But after a while of saying that, I can get, as soon as I would say that, they would automatically reply with, oh, I'm sorry. And then I would then have to launch into like, no, you don't need to be sorry, I've got a great life, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I still sort of fight, like nowadays I would like to just tell people to, I'm not going to swear, but I'd like to tell them just to bugger off. There you go, that's not too bad. I'd like to tell them that. And sometimes I will sort of say, look, that's really nosy, I'm not going to answer that, is how I tend to sort of answer as well. But it does still make me feel quite sort of othered and icky and vulnerable as well, especially if it's somebody in my house. Like workmen seem to be the worst for it. If we've ever got anybody in fixing anything in the house, I am so on edge. Most of the time now, I just make sure I'm not around and just let Jace deal with it. But yeah, I think what I sort of have to do is go easy on myself, because what I can then do is I'll get one of these interactions. Sometimes I won't answer how I wanted to. So then I give myself a hard time about it for the rest of the day. I'm like, oh, why didn't you say that? You've let yourself down. What sort of activist are you? So I have to be really kind and gentle with myself when I start sort of, and remind myself that it's a horrible power dynamic. It's a horrible situation. And, if I don't always answer how I'd like to, that's okay. And it is, as you say, then just finding, Jace is great and he's really sweet about it, but it's only my disabled friends who really get it. And I think, or I'll go on Instagram, as and just have a big sort of rant about it. And then that in itself, knowing that I'm just talking to a load of people who get it, that in itself is just really helpful.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And it makes me laugh that you say it's the like maintenance people, because I always say the maintenance guy at my college is like the most ableist person. So apparently it's just a part of the trade.
Worldwide, yeah.
Yeah, it's just their thing. It's awful, but yeah, I love how you said like not to be hard on yourself too. I think that comes up so often. Yeah.
So what if you were writing letters to yourself, your younger self, what would you tell your younger self first and foremost? And what would that letter entail, I guess?
I think I just want to go give her such a big hug, first of all. So I really struggled in my teenage years, like my disability. I think literally I was about 12 when like we sort of realized that I didn't have any sensation in my feet. I used to get a lot of ulcers. I'd be on crutches a lot. I'd have to wear special shoes to school. And I just really sort of struggled with it all, but nobody gave me the space to talk about it. So I was quite an angry I was just very unhappy, but what was sort of put onto me was that I was difficult. You know, I grew up thinking that teenage me was horrible, that she was a bitch, that she was moody, she was this, she was that. And again, it's only when I sort of started looking at ableism and addressing that I was like, no, oh my God, no, she was fine. Like, she just had so much going on and no one to talk to about it. And if I could go back, I would just be that person to say, you know, you are more than enough. Your disability is not a flaw. You are just living in this ableist world where people think it is. And I would sort of tell her that, you know, for all the crappy friendships that you're in now with these girls that like you one minute and don't like you the next, and all of this stuff, that, you know, you are going to go on and connect with amazing people, and you're going to have some really amazing times, not despite your disability, but because of your disability. You know, 15-year-old me would have never dreamt of being, you know, of being able, like, you know, of not caring, of embracing, you know, feeling neutral, I guess is probably the better word. 15-year-old me would have never thought that she could have felt neutral about disability, neutral about my scars and amputations and all of this stuff. And I would tell her that you're going to, whether you like it or not, that's where you're going to get to. And that, you know, that just that she's really loved and she's not damaged. And yeah, her disability is not a negative part of who she is. That's what I would tell my younger self.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I feel like kind of like you were saying earlier, just all of us growing up kind of without this sense of disability pride need to hear a lot of that around that time period. It's just so I don't know, such a huge thing. Our next question kind of ties into that of what advice would you give to disabled youth now as we move into this disability justice movement? So I know that there's like a couple people on this call and like on the YouTube and all of the different places that this is being streamed or whatever, that are like wanting to be involved in the disability justice movement and like wanting to do activism stuff or just be like a proud disabled person in general. So kind of what advice do you have for them to move specifically in that direction of like activism or whatever?
I think first of all would be kind of following, you know, other people in the movement, people like Mia Mingus and Alice Wong, who you had on, and I was like, oh, that's really exciting, you know, because they are, you know, the people that are leading this movement. And I think it's really important, you know, and that's what I do as well, you know, is to follow, you know, our Black disabled leaders and the people that have been doing this work even longer than I have. And I think it's just to sort of tell your story, because even though there's, you know, there's so many of us, all of our stories are so different, and to just sort of tell your story in whatever way that looks like for you, and not to feel pressured that, you know, oh, I'm not doing the work this way, or my work needs to look like this. Like, you are uniquely you, and your story is such an important part of, you know, the tapestry that makes up disability. Because often it's people like me, you know, white wheelchair users, we're like the poster girl for disability, when we know it is, you know, so much more than that and so much more diverse than that, and all the different intersections of disability. So, you know, there is a space for all of us to tell our stories. And I also think it's really important to rest as well. When I first started doing this, somebody sort of said to me, you know, you must be very careful of burnout. I was like, I'm fine, I'll be fine. And I've, had times when I have just not been fine, because with all the kind of good that comes with connecting with the community, you're also absorbing so much, you know, you're listening to other people's stories and what they're experiencing, and sometimes it is a lot to sort of, it feels very heavy to know how we're all being treated. And I think it's so important to take a break from that and to just rest and to experience some joy, because, you know, you can't be sort of, you know, if you're burnt out, you're not going to be able to do that sort of work anyway. But I think, yeah, just not sort of, even just being, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, because sometimes I feel like a bit of a professional disabled person, and I love that side of it, but also, you know, I'm a big nerd. I like going to comic conventions, I like dressing up as a zombie, I like dancing around. You know, there's more to me than just, you know, doing the disability activism. And I think there's a lot to be said for just existing as yourself in a world that would like to see you hide away and not, you know, and just thinks that you're, whatever these views are that people have about us. I think just existing in your life, in your joy, is in itself just such an important thing to do for this kind of movement, because people, you know, do just think disabled people are wheelchair users, you know, who are at home all the time, who don't do anything. And I think, you know, by us all sharing our stories is what hopefully eventually, you know, I think that representation, I feel like I'm going off track a bit, but for me, I think representation is so important, and we're just starting to see accurate, tiny drips of accurate representation, like Crip Camp, you know, for example, was like, yes, this is what this is, you know, look, we're funny, we talk about sex and stuff, and we're smart, and we're this and we're that. And, you know, I just think the more of us are out there telling our stories, the more representation, the more of a, you know, a rounded view sort of other people will get, or we'll just eventually take over the world, which I feel is also an option that we could do.
I'm down for that. Love it. I think we have one more question from us, and then we have quite a few Q&A questions here, actually, so I'm super excited about those. But Evan, do you want to ask the last question, and then we'll move into some Q&A? So if you haven't asked a Q&A question yet, drop it in the chat, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, my last question for you, Nia, is what was, because we're all, me and Tame and I are in college right now, but I'm just curious to know what was your experience growing up as a student with a disability? What was your experience growing up as a student with a disability?
It was rubbish. I didn't like it. Yeah, I found it really tricky. My secondary, so I had a lot of time off, and that wasn't really supported. I mean, I sort of, you know, I was a teenager in the 90s, so I don't know if it's worse or better now, but for me, there was just sort of never really any support provided when I was off for such lengths of time. I think I might have been sent home a little bit of work, but not really. So then every time I came back to school, not only did I feel kind of not, you know, behind in my education, then you've also got the thing of feeling suddenly like isolated from the social side of it as well, because, you know, even having a day off when you're a teenager can feel like you've missed out on all of this vital stuff that you need to know. So I found that just, yeah, really tricky. My school wasn't particularly accessible. There wasn't really any accommodations made for when I was sort of coming in on crutches and things like that. And yeah, and I'd like to think it's better now, but from what I hear from younger people who I talk to, like when I'm sort of doing community questions and stuff on my social media, like it doesn't feel like it's particularly better, and the access is still rubbish, and the teachers' attitudes are still terrible, and the support just doesn't seem to be there. I sort of went to a mainstream school as well, and I was the only visibly disabled person there, of quite a big school. So being like the only disabled person was just yet again not a pleasant experience, because I had nobody to relate in any way, shape or form to what I was going through. You know, and things like if like my incontinence showed up or something like that was the most mortifying, shameful thing in the whole world, and I never wanted anyone to know. And so it kind of just felt like a very heavy time of just desperately trying to fit in to a world that I just wasn't really going to fit into, but I kept giving it my hardest. And yeah, so it wasn't a good, college was better. And then I kind of just, that was it for me. I didn't sort of go any further I returned to education in later life. But yeah, as a younger person, it wasn't a great experience.
Yeah, I think that's so ridiculously common for a lot of us. And I'm sure that Evan and I can both say very similar things about high school and college and mainstreaming and all of that. I think in kind of jumping into questions from the audience, there's one that sort of, it can kind of relate to this, I guess, but in terms of, well, there's two kind of surrounding parenting, so we'll maybe go in that direction.
Okay.
But in terms of, which I think this links to kind of what you were just talking about, but in things that you're hoping for your son, is there anything that you're hoping, sort of that you've experienced that you're hoping that he doesn't have to experience as a disabled person? Maybe that's in education, maybe otherwise. And then also just what is it like, this is like different but still about parenting, but what is it like to be a parent with a disability? And do you, like, what sort of things do you face with that? Ableism, fun, I don't know, anything like that. So kind of those two.
Okay. So for Clark, I want him to have a completely different experience to me. I always just felt like I spent a lot of time trying to get people to like me. And already he's got completely different confidence to me. You know, he's just sometimes I think too confident. He'll literally tell his brothers that he's the better one because he's disabled, and I'm like, yeah, okay, we need to bring the confidence down a few levels, babe. You know, he is really confident, and long may that continue. I don't want him, you know, he's got the option, his back, for example, we've both got lumps on our back, and his is slightly, his doesn't contain his nerves, so he can have his taken off when he's older, like if he wants to. And he's already said, no, I don't want to. And I'm kind of secretly hoping that he always thinks that, because I would be devastated. I would support him either way, but you know, it's such a part of who he is. And I love that he, you know, he loves that side of him. And we're very careful in our language as well, because when I grew up, I always had a good foot and a bad foot. And I know it doesn't seem like a big thing, but I don't want him to refer to any part of himself as bad. You know, I want it to, you know, so he has his, you know, his brace foot. That's what it is. It's his brace foot. It's not bad. It's not wrong. It's not. And so I just want him to just continue with this sort of sense of pride and never feel shameful about his body, the way it functions, or anything else. Because he's lovely. And
Love that.
with the other question, so what's it like parenting as a disabled person? No, it's like, it's wonderful. Like, I love the, you know, sort of being able to know that I'm sending 4 children out into the world who will not be ableist assholes makes me very happy. You know, I think we've all met people sometimes who aren't disabled, but they're nice and they're not weird. And it's like, you get that little thing with them. I think Mia Mingus described it as access intimacy. I think she'd done this amazing piece on that. Just that feeling you can get with some people where you just think, you're not going to say anything silly to me. You're just treating me like a person. And I'm very pleased that my children are going to go out into the world like that. And we have like loads of fun, you know, like we dance. My little one, my youngest is only 3. So he still thinks it's super fun to sit on my lap and pretend I'm a bus, and we go for tour rides around the house and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. Like, we just have fun. So there's loads of good stuff. And the bad stuff is, you know, what it is in for all of us, but in different ways. So excuse me, most of the time people don't, if I'm out with my kids, people don't think I'm the parent. we had this situation where we were at the farm and I was in my wheelchair and my youngest Carrie was, I think he was about 1. He was in his buggy next to me and a woman come over with a live baby chick and went to pass it to him. And I was like, don't give him that, he will eat it. And she just sort of looked at me like, who are you? And proceeded to give him the chick. And of course he went and straight and tried to put it in his mouth. So she grabbed it and walked away. But I was like, you didn't think I was his mum. Like, you just did not think in that situation that I was the parent. And that's kind of weird. Like on the sort of school run with my other kids, it's that same kind of sort of awkwardness that, you know, people don't tend to come and talk to me because I'm the wheelchair mum. But that's okay. That's fine. And I think a big thing when like they were little is there's no products for disabled parents, you know, there's nothing. So again, it was down to like the amazing community. That's where I found the support, you know, when I was trying to work out how I could safely carry my youngest on a mobility scooter that I was using. It was the community that come through and was like, oh, well, try this. And I think, you know, obviously there's some disabled people that physically can't have children, just like there's some non-disabled people who can't physically have children. But I think there's a lot of disabled people that can physically have children, but feel like they can't or they shouldn't just because that's what we get told. You know, it's that kind of, well, what if you pass your disability on? Well, what if I do? You know, disabled people exist. It's okay. We're never going to not exist. Like, you know, and I think it makes me sad to think, you know, that some people rule out parenthood just on the basis because they think they can't or they shouldn't. You know, I think with the right support and everything else, you know, I think disabled people make brilliant parents. So, yeah, it's again, it's like most things with my disability, you know, 80%, if not more, of the reasons I don't like, you know, that I struggle with being disabled is all to do with societal stuff, nothing to do with me actually having spina bifida. Yeah. You know, if the world was accessible and people weren't really weird, then I'd be fine. You know, I would get by. I could deal with the other stuff. So yeah, I think it's same stuff. Weird attitudes, no representation, undervalued, all of that kind of stuff.
Lots of weird people saying lots of weird things.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just consistent thing. And I appreciate you like going into that because it's so, I think like you said, it like doesn't get talked about that often. It's always kind of just like, oh, like it's fine, they mean well or whatever. But like, no, it feels really weird. So glad.
It does, and we don't see it, do we? Like, when do you ever really see a disabled person, you know, in a parenting role? I mean, we don't see disabled people anywhere anyway, but you know, even like in adverts, like I know it's rare because when I see it, I think there was somebody posted an IKEA catalogue that had a picture of a disabled mum in a wheelchair with their child, and it's like, oh my God. You know, and it shouldn't be like that. Why it shouldn't, but it is, because, you know, people just, I think people look at, you know, people would look at sort of a visibly disabled person and presume that they are completely broken, presume that, you know, they couldn't possibly be having sex to make the babies because we don't do that. You know, and it's all these kind of presumptions that get put on us that, you know, it is a thing, you know, sort of going out with my kid. And even that, like, if I want to go out somewhere, if I want to go to the cinema, if I want to go to the theatre, I can get my wheelchair space and a carer's space. Trying to book anything for me, Jace, and the 4 kids is like, you know, disabled families are not catered for in that way. So, yeah, it's a weird one.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that was mentioned in the Q&A by Sarit, who's our friend from the Ed Roberts Project, said, this is not a question, but talking about, like when you were talking earlier about being a parent to your son with a disability, when you said disability looks beautiful on him, she said, thank you for saying that, because that is such a cool quote. Love that. So just wanted to put that out there. And then there are a couple questions about you living in the UK, and how Jamie is asking how people are treated in the UK with people with disabilities are treated in the UK. And then one question up here about like what does disability justice look like in the UK? And is there like a local community there, or have you found most of your community online?
So the second question in disability justice, for me, that exists. I mean, my entire disabled community for me is online. Although I have like there's not necessarily disability justice project, but I'm involved in another project locally where we are collecting oral histories of disabled people I live in a place called Essex, which is like an hour from London. So I'm sort of connected in with the community in that way, but in regards to all my sort of activism and disability justice stuff is all online, because I think a lot of that, I don't think that exists as much in the UK. I feel like that's something if we live in the UK we tap into it, but it feels like it's where you guys are. What was the other question? Oh, what's it like to be a disabled person in the UK?
How do people treat disabled people? What is it like?
I think it's probably exactly the same as it is over there. So like historically, sort of eugenics started in the UK by Francis, I think it was Francis Dalton, who was Charles Darwin's cousin. And he sort of come up with the idea of this sort of perfect, person, and this sort of his ideas fed into like Hitler went and ran with a load of his ideas, and then I think it came over to the US. So for sort of back in the day, if you were disabled, you were put in a home, and they literally had like sort of child catchers on the street that would go up to children and ask them questions. And if they couldn't answer them, they were deemed as disabled and they were put into a home. It was pretty bleak. And we sort of, over time, we have had groups of activists campaigning for different things, and, things have changed. As I say, that I think, again, it's the same. It's like all this stuff they're supposed to do. If you're building a bunch of new houses, a certain amount should be accessible. Are they? No, not really. So I think the treat over here, we have the only times you really visibly see disabled people is the Paralympics, and once a year we have something on the telly called Children in Need, which I hate, which is a big charity fundraiser where they just wheel disabled kids out, make them tell their personal stories, and then hope people donate money. So it's very much that kind of, oh, you're such an inspiration for just existing, or, oh, I'm really going to pity you. Like, we're just viewed through those two kind of lenses, which I think is pretty much worldwide in how disabled people are treated, really.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I from what I've seen on the internet, at least, I feel like it is a very similar kind of treatment across the board. But yeah, this is a fun question from someone. I have names on some of these, but not names on other ones. But they say your style is fantastic, which totally is. Love it on Instagram right now, all the times. Your style is fantastic. And it seems like disability and style isn't accepted by society. And like we hear people say things like, you're so cute, or you're so beautiful for a disabled person, or like, too bad you're disabled, or whatever. So how, like, have you experienced that? And if you have, what did you do with that? Or like, what would you do with that?
I experienced that with my parents, actually. So obviously, my parents are in their 70s, and would not, when I started identifying as disabled, they just couldn't, like, my dad was like, but you're not disabled. I'm like, Dad, I'm in a wheelchair. Like, how much? I'm pretty disabled. And then he'd be like, or my mum would be like, but you're too pretty to be disabled. And so I just would have to break it down and say, what does that mean? Just how, I don't understand what that means. Like, are you saying that disabled people can't be attractive? Because every disabled person I know is a total babe, so that's ridiculous. And yeah, it's that kind of, or as you said, like the cute thing, like you're so sweet. And I don't sort of get that. I still get that, and I think most of the people saying it to me are like half my age. That's really weird as well. But it is something I think about. I often wonder, like, do I dress? I love fashion and I love color. So I love colors. I'm literally sat in a black top today, but I do normally like dressing very colorfully, and I might have my hair different colors, and I sort of often, and I think I started doing that in secondary school, and I think it was a way to kind of almost like notice something else about me. Instead of just sort of focusing in on that. But I think half the time now, because I'm in a wheelchair, I could literally be naked and just wearing nipple tassels and nobody had noticed me anyway. So now I definitely do it just sort of for myself and just dress for myself. And that kind of, I think a lot of the time when people ask ridiculous questions, just sort of most of the time be just sort of saying back, what do you mean? Is enough for them to sort of think, like, to start questioning it and realizing it's a ridiculous question. Someone says, what's wrong with you? What do you mean? And it's the same, you're really pretty for a disabled person, but what do you mean? And just trying to just break it down so that they realize that they're just being an absolute pillock.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like that's a helpful, like, for a lot of different ableist comments, just like, what do you mean? Like, like, where's that? That feels like a good, like, stock response to have, to just be like, what? Really?
Yeah.
What?
Or things like, can I, if somebody says to me, can I ask you what's wrong with you? And then it's like, well, can I ask you why you want to know?
Yeah.
It's often just throwing their question back at them is enough to disarm them and get them on the ropes.
Yeah, I get the can I pray for you a lot, and I'm like, for what? Like, I don't know. Can you? No.
I'd like some more money. That's great. I could have that, but
yeah, that'd be nice. But yeah, it's definitely a thing. And I think this is one of my favorite questions in the chat. Where is it? I have a lot of things here. But what advice do you have for disabled youth having a hard time finding their disability identity and pride? I think that's maybe a good, like,
I think not to give yourself a hard time about it. I think we all get there at different times, and it doesn't make you like a bad disabled person if you don't feel that pride yet, or if you don't feel that kind of comfortable within that identity. I think trying to find disability pride in this world is a hard thing to do when all around you the message that we're all hearing is that we're not enough, that our scars are ugly. It's a lot to kind of have to battle against. And I would just say, just go so easy on yourself, and and watch things like Crip Camp, and just sort of listen to other disabled people, and realize that you are not alone in how you feel, that everybody, we all have felt like that. And I know people sort of older than me who never, who refuse to call themselves disabled, who never sort of find that disability pride. And I think to have those kind of, to struggle with it as a younger person is so normal. And for me, the kind of older I've got, the less of a shit I've given about other people's opinions. I don't care what other people think about my weight or what I look like or how I dress. It's for me. And I think I spent so much time trying to fit in to be as non-disabled as possible. Just that's the goal. That's the, walking is the gold standard, non-disabled people are the gold standard. And it's not, disability, when you really break it down and look at disability, it's such a, you could look at most people and be like, not saying everybody's disabled, but sometimes it feels like sort of different, like when people become pregnant for a while, that's, it can be quite disabling. And and I found that before my mobility was even bad. And I think disability is such a sort of spectrum, and I don't know, I've sort of waffling on, probably losing my train of thought a bit. But I think, I guess the older I've got, the more I've realised that I don't need to be trying to be this person, this sort of version of myself, this like non-disabled. It's nonsense. Like, disabled people are some of the, we are such innovators, and there's so many things like tech and stuff that's out there that is because of us, because of the people that have come before us, that they have, there's just great people. And I think just try and kind of search that out and look at the history of disability, and just, how we are still here, still fighting, still existing, still finding joy in life, and, finding joy in a world that can be incredibly hostile towards us, and just know that it will come in time, and not to give yourself a hard time if you're not there yet.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I think we have basically 2 more questions from the chat, so we'll do that and then wrap up. But the second to last one will be from Brian. How did you get involved with your community? And like, I'm assuming specifically like disability community, like what, I don't know, like what did you do to get involved?
It was just sort of by accident. As I say, it was just like Instagram and stumbling. I think somebody I knew who also used a walking stick, because that's what I was using at the time. It's like, look at this hashtag. And that was it. And I think Mia Mingus was one of the first people I followed, and was like, just devoured everything she wrote. And Rebecca Sitting Pretty was like, oh my gosh, you're me, you're speaking all my words. And it was purely Instagram and just sort of stumbling somehow into this community. And I'd never seen myself represented. I'd never seen, I feel like I've done the most learning in the last sort of 4 years than I have my entire life. And just sort of, and I love it. I just want to read every single person's story. I want to know everything. And I just, it was completely by accident, and the best thing that ever happened.
I love that. Yeah, I honestly fell into it in a similar way. And I think you and like a couple other people were the first accounts that I followed. And then it was like right around the like Q&A time where like people were like, ask me a question all the time. And I think I asked you and like one other person, I was like, who are other people I should be following? And that was like a huge thing for me, was just getting like following all those people. So just that, I don't know, that feels like it's just, you got to follow a bunch of people, which weirdly perfectly follows into the next question, is who are maybe you just kind of answered this, but who are some of your mentors and some of the people that you I don't know, like think highly of in the disability community?
Definitely Mia Mingus and Alice Wong and Imani, Crutches and Spice, Sitting Pretty, Rebecca, Carson Tula, I think that's how you pronounce it. So I'm really terrible at pronouncing names. One of my sort of somebody that I started following but then become really close friends with is my friend Mary, who runs an account called Invalid Art. It's like 2 underscores, I think. And Mary, like Mary's work has just been sort of fantastic. Trying to think about that. There's billions of people, but now my mind has gone completely blank, obviously. I've got on my Instagram, I have a highlight, one of my highlights of just like disabled accounts to follow that I think are really sort of good accounts.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, everybody go check out those accounts, because that was pretty much exactly what got me involved. And then I think kind of our last question for you is just, do you have like a last piece of advice or a last like story that you want to share about disability pride or disability justice?
Goodness, I don't know now. I think I don't know if I'm all storied out. I think it's just, repeating that kind of, it's not me, it's ableism. And you know, we are sold this tiny idea of what life should look like, you know, what beauty looks like, what is considered attractive, what a normal relationship should look like, what sex should look like. And it's all fits into this teeny tiny box. And living actually outside of that box is so freeing, because you can just, you know, wear what you want, not worry about your weight or your body size, not, you know, relationships. No two relationships are the same, and people will look at your relationship, especially if you're with a non-disabled person, and think that, oh, they deserve a medal, and oh, it must be so hard for them. And, you know, people are always going to have their opinions, they're always going to put their judgments on your life, and it doesn't matter, because I genuinely think, you know, I know sort of a lot of my friends as well, in their relationships and their life, kind of being outside of this sort of Western Eurocentric idea of beauty and everything else is amazing, because it's like, look at all those people still spending billions of pounds on cellulite cream or dieting or whatever else, trying to change themselves. I don't need to do that, because even if I did, I'm not going to be accepted because I'm disabled. So actually this is brilliant, because I don't need to buy into any of that garbage. And that's been a sort of a big thing for me over the last couple of years, is just fully feeling very neutral. You know, I think we're often told to feel, you know, sometimes we can be told to feel things about our bodies that just doesn't feel realistic. There might be parts of us that we don't adore, and it feels weird to say that we do. But I think for me, becoming neutral with the parts of myself that for a long time I hated, you know, my feet that were, you know, very misshapen and stuff, for me, getting to a point now where I don't love them as much as I love my face, but you know, I can feel neutral about them. And I think that's a really good place to start from, to appreciate your body for all that it does, and to just feel neutral about the parts that society tells us are yucky, you know, yucky, speaking like a 3-year-old, but you know what I mean. Neutrality, I think, you know, disabled to me is a neutral word, and we all pour into that our very unique individual lives.
Yeah, that feels super helpful to kind of end with that, like, I don't know, just like, it's, yeah, that like neutral and like acceptance of like, this is who we are. This is what it is. Yeah, I love that. And just like, yeah, thank you so much for all of the stuff you shared. But for I think we need to get a hashtag, it's not me, it's ableism, going. I feel like that's a thing. But I just loved everything you had to say. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of that.
Oh, honestly, thank you so much for inviting me. It always sort of still catches me by surprise, like, why do they want me to come and talk? So it's been really lovely. I hope I haven't spoke too fast for you lovely ASL interpreters, because I know I can gabber a bit. So yeah, and thank you so much, Evan, as well. You've both been lovely. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, it's been a privilege being able to talk to you. At least I know Tame's been looking forward to these for. You've been on her list, and when we first started talking about who we wanted to speak, and I know Tame was really looking forward to using ours as well, just from following on Instagram and Twitter the last month and a half of I actually knew you existed, because I'm still kind of learning the whole disability side of things too. It's definitely intriguing to watch. And it's fun to be a part of Yo, as because it gets me more in touch with my disabled roots, and because I'm the only one in my family that's disabled, so it's kind of and God bless my mom. I love her dearly, and she pretty much a rock, but like she still doesn't really get the whole like why I hate going to grocery stores and people look at me differently. Like she can empathize, but like it truly takes other people with disabilities to understand where you're coming from. So I thank you for that. And I believe we are ready to move on. And I'm gonna share my screen again. I'm happy to announce wait, sorry, hold on. Hope I can operate this thing. Yes.
It's loading.
Oh God, well, technology. So our next speaker will be Rebecca Coakley. She is worked for the National Council on Disability, and she also since 2013, she also worked in the under the Obama administration in the Department of Education. Well, apparently it won't let me.
Oh, there it is.
Is it working now?
Yep, you're not on the screen. Yep, now you're there.
All right, so I'm holy freaking hell. I'm sorry for my language, people. Rebecca Coakley, as I was saying, she's an American disability rights activist. She's the executive director of the National Council of Disability, and she is also working in the Department of Health and Education under the Obama administration. So I'm now won't let me stop sharing my screen. Yeah.
So she is our next
We will be our next speaker, and we will let you know when that is, because we have a survey for you guys to fill out after this, and based on what your answers are, we will have a set a time and date for that.
Yeah.
So any final words, Sam?
Yep. Yeah, just thank you all so much for coming, and thank you again, Nina, and our ASL interpreters and all of that. We're super excited about this series, and I already feel like I've learned so much. So thank you so much for being here. And
thank you again for having me. It's been lovely.
I think we'll
I'll forgive you for being a Liverpool fan.
sign off now. If that's cool with all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
See you later. Bye.